As of today, we're okay, but that'll change over the coming week or so.
The Premier is sounding the alarm about a serious shortage of personal protective equipment in Ontario, a shortage he's blaming on the U.S. government. The Premier says the current supply of critical gear for healthcare workers, such as masks and gowns, will run out in a week. Farah Morelli joins us live now from Hospital Road tonight. And Farah, the Premier making it clear who he blames for this.
Very clear, Dwight, and that is U.S. government officials. He says that they are the ones that are responsible for holding up this equipment, this crucial supply of equipment at the border. Now, this all comes not long after U.S. President Donald Trump, of course, asked or ordered, rather, companies like 3M to stop exporting these N95 respirator masks to Canada as well as Latin America. What we learned today from the Premier is that Ontario put in its own order of masks, but they're now stuck. Many of them are stuck at the border. And all of this comes after weeks of hearing from the government here in Ontario that we really do have enough when it comes to supply. But today, Premier Doug Ford painted a very different and bleak picture.
This is a matter of life or death.
Premier Doug Ford didn't mince words when saying Ontario's supply of crucial equipment is now strained.
I don't want to be crying wolf, unless it's real, and I'm being honest. It's serious. We're down to a week. If this 500,000 comes in, that will buy us another week.
Ford said today around 3 million masks were ordered from the U.S., but only 500,000 have been allowed to cross the border. And that leaves Ontario in a dire situation. It's a different message than one we've been hearing from the Ford government. Less than 2 weeks ago, Health Minister Christine Elliott said there are enough supplies in Ontario and that more are on the way.
We are working at procurement 24/7. Ontario companies are stepping up in great numbers to help us.
But those working on the front line say they have been flagging shortages across the province for weeks.
It's hugely upsetting because my colleagues are absolutely ready to do everything they need to do, but they need the basic tools to do it. They have the tools here, but if they don't have how to protect themselves, it's just unfathomable.
Some hospitals like Humber River say while they're okay for supplies now, that will change.
Well, like everybody, we're being very careful with where we're using it, that we don't use too much of it. Well, I wouldn't say that we're in dire straits as of today with the amount of PPE that we have, but like everybody, all of this is contingent upon getting more.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked repeatedly today whether the U.S. is blocking shipments of supplies.
We continue to have productive and positive conversations with the United States. There are very productive conversations ongoing. We continue to have constructive and productive conversations.
The question now is, what will come of those conversations? Dwight, we are hearing of some local companies stepping up, one particularly in Woodbridge that has gotten approval from Health Canada to start producing masks. The Premier says that they're ramping up production, but there's no date set for when they will be ready. So really all eyes are on the diplomatic front. And to give you a sense of how that's going, earlier today, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said it's, quote, like the Wild West out there when it comes to trying to buy medical supplies. So that really gives you a sense of what's happening on the diplomatic front. Dwight. Yeah,
it's hard to believe we're in this situation now when everybody's worried about this pandemic. Thank you, Farah. 3 more people have died at the Pinecrest Nursing Home in Bobcaygeon. That brings the death toll at the facility to 26 residents. Only 65 called Pinecrest home. That means 40% of residents there have succumbed to the virus. A woman who volunteered there also died. Across Ontario, 150 people have now died from COVID-19. Ontario health officials saying, though, there is some positive news about the number of new cases.
Today, of course, we've dropped down to just over 300, and that is our lowest almost in a week and a bit over a week.
The 309 new cases recorded in the past 24 hours is down about 100 cases from yesterday. However, Dr. Williams says it's too early to tell how significant that decrease is. Also today, officials said the backlog of testing is now just 329 cases. Nearly 600 people are in hospital in Ontario because of COVID-19, with 216 of those patients in intensive care. Ventilators are a crucial tool for treating some of those people. And tonight, CBC News has learned hospitals in the province have boosted their availability of their supply of ventilators by 50%. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the story.
In the most severe cases of COVID-19, the only way hospitals can save a patient's life is with a ventilator. It mechanically makes a patient's lungs work when they cannot breathe on their own. A limited supply of ventilators in places like Italy and Spain forced doctors to make stark choices about who would get one and who would die. Ontario hospitals normally have about 1,300 intensive care ventilators. Hundreds of them are currently in use by patients who don't have a confirmed case of COVID-19. The province forecasts that peak demand on the ICUs will come in mid-April, with upwards of 1,000 COVID-19 patients, many of them on ventilators. Ontario's Ministry of Health said in March it had plans to obtain hundreds of extra ventilators, but hospitals and doctors wondered whether there would be enough and if they would arrive in time. The good news is those ventilators are now in place. CBC News has obtained documents showing that there are nearly 2,000 ventilators in hospital ICUs around the province right now. So that means if the forecasts are accurate, there should be an adequate supply, even when the pressure on hospitals hits its highest. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
We are keeping our eyes on the UK tonight. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been moved to the intensive care unit of a London hospital after his coronavirus symptoms worsened. The 55-year-old, who was earlier diagnosed with COVID-19, was hospitalized yesterday. Margaret Evans has the latest.
I will read you the statement that we were sent out, that correspondents here in London were sent from Downing Street. From a spokesman saying that since Sunday evening, the Prime Minister has been under the care of doctors at St. Thomas Hospital after being admitted with persistent symptoms of the coronavirus. The statement says that over the course of the afternoon, the condition of the Prime Minister has worsened, and on the advice of his medical team, he has been moved to intensive care at the hospital. The Prime Minister, it says, has asked the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, to take on his duties, and the statement almost says he's receiving excellent care. So this is the second statement that we've had about his health care. Last night, shortly after the special address by the Queen to the nation, there was a statement sent out by Downing Street saying that Boris Johnson, who was diagnosed with coronavirus just over 10 days ago, had been sent to the hospital for precautionary tests. They insisted it was by no means an emergency. Throughout this 10 days in which the Prime Minister was in quarantine and self-isolation, they kept referring to his symptoms as being mild. He did make a few video performances or messages on Twitter in which people seeing it thought, he's not looking so great. He is a family man. He has children. He has a father. They will all be worried, and the nation will be worried, because this is the man who has been at the top of this fight. Also, seemingly, many analysts would tell you, quite reluctant to let the reins of control go. It was quite surprising that that he didn't actually, what's the word? He didn't, diversify control, especially when he fell sick. So a lot of confusion, and there will be a lot of worry, along with a lot of good wishes for the Prime Minister to recover.
Johnson's pregnant fiancée has also been ill with COVID-19 symptoms, but over the weekend, Carrie Simmons said she was on the mend. The 32-year-old is expecting the couple's first baby in early summer. We will bring you any updates on this story when we get them. Millions of students went back to school today for the first time in weeks. Of course, they didn't have to leave home to learn. Ontario schools officially kicked off remote learning this morning. Nali Kalada has been talking to children and parents to see how it is going so far.
Count to 100 every day. Keep your mind and body in shape.
It's not the math class Kobe Bennett is used to, but today the grade 1 student, like all students across the province, is logging on to learn.
78, 79.
Today is the first day of remote lessons, now a mandatory requirement by the Ministry of Education for students to complete the year, as officials try and flatten the curve in the midst of the pandemic. And for students, it's an adjustment.
The actual academics of it is not as good as what we'd be learning in school, and I think that it makes it even worse because we don't have our social relationships.
Here's how it works. Teachers will post lessons and activities online, and while students can send questions, answers may not be immediate like in a live classroom, leaving some parents like Natalie Bennett worried about filling the gap.
I think it's pretty easy for my youngest. He's 7, but I also have a 14-year-old who's in grade 8. He's pretty academically strong. I'm just waiting for when he comes to me with questions.
And what about students at home who don't have access to a computer or the internet? Well, the TDSB says they will be handing out devices with the internet on it to 26,000 families across Toronto, all in an effort to connect students and teachers.
I kind of look at it like a stand-up comedian might. I'm not saying I'm a comedian, but you kind of have to, without the kids in front of me, I can't read the room.
Grade 8 teacher Kimberly Liang is working hard to build effective lesson plans for her students, starting with activities to reintegrate them into the classroom setting and building from there.
Set it to the majority of what you think the kids will kind of pick up on and kind of hope for the best. And then right after I send out a lesson, check in with the ones that I know might be on the periphery, the ones that might need a little extra support, and just say, hey, did you get that?
How long schools will stay closed and classes will stay online isn't clear.
My commitment to parents is if we do our part and we're able to get students back in class, towards the late spring, early summer, after May 5th, and it's safe to do so under the advice of Dr. Williams and the Chief Medical Officer, that we will let students back in.
Is that what you mean? The minister says there's no plan to extend or cancel the school year yet. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
The City of Toronto has 1,078 confirmed cases of COVID-19 with 145 patients in hospital, 60 of them in the ICU. Today, Mayor Tory announced the city is partnering with local food banks to help people through the pandemic.
We know there are many in our community who rely on food banks and other community organizations to help them. When COVID-19 hit, access to those food banks became much more limited. Many food banks, around 40% of the programs in our community, simply had to close.
There's also been an increase of the need due to the measures taken to slow down the spread of the virus. So the city is partnering with corporations in order to meet that need. Officials are also working with the Red Cross to deliver food hampers to those unable to leave their homes. Now, starting tomorrow, you can call the Red Cross if you are in need of that service. You can find that number on their website. That's at redcross.ca/Toronto. Today is the first day people can apply for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. The website opened up this morning, and already hundreds of thousands of applications have come in. This comes as the Prime Minister announced that he's looking to extend the benefit. Nadia Nanowski now with the details.
For drummer Nick Fraser, applying for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit doesn't make sense.
I'm doing one online concert in the middle of the month, but it's not going to be a big moneymaker, I don't think.
That show would be considered income. So under the current CERB rules, Fraser wouldn't qualify for government aid, even though he's lost most of his revenue stream due to the pandemic.
The eligibility rules were really restrictive for people in the gig economy who might still be working.
Today, the Prime Minister addressed those concerns, saying those whose hours have been drastically cut will still get help.
There are groups of people who aren't benefiting from the Canada Emergency Response Benefit who probably should. I think specifically of people who've seen their hours reduced massively.
One Toronto social worker falls into that category. Her practice is closed, but she's offering online appointments, even though some of her clients can't pay.
There are some social workers and therapists who also have chosen to do zero support. They don't offer anything to their clients. I find it unethical that we close our services to clients. We need to be there for them now more than ever.
She's waiting to see how the government moves forward. One employment lawyer has a few ideas based on how regular EI benefits work.
If you qualify for EI and you're earning money from another source during the period for which you're receiving EI, the Service Canada will account for that income, but typically only offset or deduct 50% of it from your EI benefit.
The CERB portal opened today, and although there were some lengthy wait times, others got through.
It was very straightforward, and I was told after about a 1 minute long phone recording that I would have the money direct deposited within 3 to 5 days.
As for the current CERB benefit, the Prime Minister says he knew the government would have to make more adjustments in order to incorporate most Canadians. An announcement on those additions should be coming in the next few days. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
If you have more questions about the CERB, we have the answers for you. Who's eligible? How do you apply? Find those answers at cbc.ca/Toronto. She's back after 2 weeks of isolation. Welcome back, Colette Kennedy. Now, the question to you is, did they just all flow in together? You know it's Monday, right?
Yeah, you know what, Dwight? I love that you bring this up because cue the music, Max. There's a TV station in Cleveland and they are providing a public service and it goes like this. Essentially, they put up their graphic that says, what day is it? Okay, where's our graphic?
The gremlins are in the system, Colette.
Oh, there it is. And then they just kind of come in and it's Monday.
So it is Monday. I got that one right, but then I haven't been self-isolating, so I've been paying attention.
Yes, you know, it's nice if there's any little thing, whatever it is, that can bring a little smile to your face during these challenging times. And I hope this also brought a smile to your face when we take a look at some of the temperatures across southern and eastern Ontario. Just some incredible readings. For Toronto, 14 degrees, and average at this time of year is just under 10, so still single digits at 9 degrees. Now, some isolated showers to the northwest of us, northwest of the city here, but much of this not reaching the ground. When I check the reporting stations, hard to see any of this, so very little moisture so far with this, which means most of us will have partly cloudy skies through the overnight and kind of quiet conditions, and the temperature still running overnight about 5 degrees above seasonal. But then tomorrow, later in the day, things will change up. So we get sunshine, and then into the evening hours, the precipitation will move through, and that kind of lingers a little bit, taking us on into Wednesday. So we'll take a look at Wednesday's forecast and how long the mild temperatures are going to last, because they are going to be with us into tomorrow. Look at this. After the low of 13 degrees, Dwight. It's Monday, right?
Welcome back, Colette.
Thank you.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Canada's top public health official now says wearing non-medical masks when you go out could cut down on the spread of COVID-19.
That wearing a non-medical mask, even if you have no symptoms, is an additional measure that you can take to protect others around you in situations where physical distancing is difficult to maintain, such as in public transit or maybe at a grocery store.
Tam says non-medical masks can help prevent people who may be carrying the virus and not know it from infecting others. The new guidance comes as countries around the world, including the U.S., are telling their citizens masks should be worn by everyone. Tam provided some detail today on the things people can use to make their own mask.
We're talking about things that are readily available in anyone's home, things like cotton shirts, sheets, bandanas, and other materials. But we're also going to tell people things that they shouldn't use as well. And we have our engineers looking at the evidence on those. But I think it's simple things that not complicated and preferably no sewing required.
She adds non-medical masks are not proven to protect you from getting COVID-19. She says hand washing and physical distancing remain the best ways of avoiding the virus.
Go to the cemetery, but we have to stay in our cars. I can't even get out to give my mother a hug.
Grieving during the COVID-19 pandemic. After the break, how saying goodbye to loved ones has changed as we fight the coronavirus. We'll be right back. As the COVID-19 death toll continues to rise in our province, those in the funeral industry are bracing for a surge in deaths in the coming weeks. For family members, isolation is compounding the grief in a way that's never been faced before. Stephanie Matisse explains.
This is what a funeral visitation can look like in the age of COVID-19.
Keeping you in our thoughts and prayers.
71-year-old Frances Kaufman died alone in a Chatham-Kent hospital of cancer, with visiting restricted because of COVID-19. Added to that, because of self-isolation, his son Adam can't be with his siblings or mom.
There are reasons for our traditions, that the grieving process we go through, what we get out of it, how it's healthy. And to not be able to do that, I wonder how it's going to affect each of us in the long run.
There are no hugs or handshakes at Rosar Morrison Funeral Home in Toronto. A maximum of 10 people are allowed in, spaced apart.
We have utilized live streaming, webcasting, lots of things that we had in the past, but certainly have not used to this extent.
In Bobcaygeon, where more than a dozen seniors have died, another drive-by condolence procession. In a Sarnia nursing home, national figure skater Michael Marinaro lost his grandmother to COVID-19. His family will gather graveside, sort of.
We have to stay in our cars. I can't even get out to give my mother a hug.
This military counselor says without traditional funerals, we could experience something similar to wartime mass mourning.
Funerals, whether it's planning for them, going through them, connecting with others, gives us a sense of control in what is a sense of actual complete loss of control. And that can produce relief from that intense pain.
And for Kaufman, without the gathering to honor his dad,
It's an odd sense of disconnect from the grieving when you can't be with your family and you can't be with the people that loved him to be able to talk about what impacted them, the great things about him, because there are reasons for our traditions, that the grieving process we go through, what we get out of it, how it's healthy, and to not be able to do that, I wonder how it's going to affect each of us in the long run.
Another impact he'll assess when eventually the pandemic is over. Stephanie Matisse, CBC News, Toronto.
A Toronto business owner is trying to help people who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. He started buying gift cards for grocery stores and sending them to people who need them.
You know, being in personal circumstances where, you need help and no one's there to help you, it's heartbreaking, man. And I think the big thing is we shouldn't have to be under drastic circumstances for people to take drastic measures to help one another. My thinking is I would rather people be able to spend the money to have a place to live and not worry necessarily about putting food on the plate. I know $100 isn't a lot, but it does help.
When Espiritu had to close down his clothing store a few weeks ago, he started to think about all the other people who would be out of work. Using his own money, he started buying $100 gift cards from Loblaws grocery stores and searched for people in need to send them to. Word spread, and soon he was hearing from people who wanted to help. Through a GoFundMe page, he's raised almost $25,000. Espiritu says he's already sent out about 300 of the cards, and then he has no plans on stopping anytime soon. Good stuff. As health officials continue to urge physical distancing, video conferencing has become an invaluable tool for those working from home. But how secure are those online modes of communication? Zoom, one of the most popular apps, is facing growing criticism over privacy and security concerns. Zuleka Nathu explains.
As Board of Education.
Dennis Johnson was defending his doctoral dissertation last week.
Students of color were not achieving at the same rate as
when this happened.
I see a circle on my screen, and then I see another circle, and then another shape, and it's like it's a penis. And then I see the letters NIGGER.
We blurred the content, but Johnson's faculty saw the full effect of what's known as Zoom bombing. Malicious users invade a chat group, often with profanity and racial slurs. It's happening in Canada, too.
They started shouting racial epithets. They shouted the N-word.
Maya Roy says a 250-person town hall she hosted earlier this week for the YWCA was attacked.
It's not just a couple of kids messing around with your Zoom call or with your Zoom meeting. They are using hate speech.
The FBI told CBC News it's investigating a handful of what it calls video teleconferencing hijackings. But it also said the best way to avoid Zoom bombing is to follow these tips. Add a password to any online meeting. Change settings so only the host can share their screen, and don't share a link to meetings on social media. The University of Toronto's renowned tech research group, the Citizen Lab, says Zoom is fine for a virtual beer with friends or a book club. But its latest report also says Zoom's encryption is flawed, and the platform should not be used for private meetings like health or legal appointments.
If there's a need to discuss confidential or sensitive data over Zoom, I'd recommend potentially looking for another way to do that.
Zoom told CBC News it's trying to be proactive about fixes and, in a blog post, apologized for overstating the security properties of its encryption. Zuleka Nathu, CBC News, Los Angeles.
We know there is a shortage of medical equipment in Ontario hospitals, but what about staff?
Being a Canadian citizen, I feel that I need to have the chance to pay back to Canada. So I'm waiting a call. Once they need me, I'm a soldier in this country.
They were trained and worked overseas. Now some doctors say they're ready to step up and help in the fight against COVID-19. We'll have that story for you coming up next. Premier Doug Ford is sounding the alarm about a serious shortage of personal protective equipment in this province. In just 1 week's time, he says we could run out of supplies needed to help frontline workers in the fight against COVID-19. From Morelli's Live again on Hospital Row and Far, the Premier throwing the blame for this on U.S. officials.
Very much so, Dwight. He says they're responsible for not allowing this crucial equipment to cross the border here into Canada. And this all comes not long after U.S. President Donald Trump ordered companies like 3M not to export these N95 masks that are so crucial in the fight against COVID-19 to countries like Canada as well as to Latin America. What we heard from the Premier today is that Ontario put in an order for masks, roughly 3 to 4 million is what he said, but that they're not being allowed to cross the border. Only about 500,000 are being released here to Ontario, and it's because of that we're now in this dire situation. Today, the Premier called this a matter of life or death.
I don't want to be crying wolf, unless it's real, and I'm being honest. It's serious. We're down to a week. If this 500,000 comes in, that will buy us another week.
Now, Dwight, this is a very different message than the one we've been hearing from government officials here in Ontario. For the past few weeks, we've heard from frontline healthcare workers that they're running low on equipment, they're rationing equipment, but health officials in Ontario have repeatedly said that there is enough equipment or that more supply is on the way. So certainly a change in tone tonight, Dwight, from Premier Doug Ford and his government.
But Farah, are you hearing from healthcare workers about this news? Are they worried about this now?
They certainly are, Dwight. And the thing is that these healthcare workers that I spoke to today, they say they've been flagging this as an issue for a long time. They weren't surprised to hear this. They were troubled by it. But I had a chance to speak to the CEO of the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario about this. And here's what she had to say.
It's hugely upsetting. Tell me when you record. It's hugely upsetting because my colleagues are absolutely ready to do everything they need to do. But they need the basic tools to do it. They have the tools here, but if they don't have how to protect themselves, it's just unfathomable.
We know local companies, Dwight, are stepping up to start producing masks. One in Woodbridge, Ontario, has gotten approval from Health Canada to produce more masks. But really, all eyes are on the diplomatic front. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has repeatedly said that conversations have been productive with U.S. officials. But on the other hand, we're hearing from Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, who's saying it's like the Wild West out there when it comes to trying to buy medical supplies right now, Dwight.
And it should not be like that. Thank you for that, Farah. Now, thousands of doctors who trained and worked overseas before moving to Canada want to contribute to the fight against COVID-19. Many are offering just to volunteer. Taylor Ritchie looks at how that might be possible.
For me, because I came from a war crisis, I have experience in dealing with crisis.
In Syria, Vinig Garabedian kept his clinic open after it was hit by rockets. When he fled war-torn Aleppo and landed at Pearson, he was one of the first to be welcomed by the Prime Minister.
You're safe at home now.
Now he says he wants nothing more than to give back.
They need not only the equipment, but they need the staff. And here I am passing an examination, I am qualified, and I can extend my hand.
Thousands of other international medical graduates say they're ready to step up, and there's a way they can. Ontario's College of Physicians and Surgeons is issuing 30-day supervised licenses, and foreign-trained doctors who have recently completed their Canadian medical exams can apply.
And they have huge experience in the field.
Many have passed their exams but haven't landed a residency placement. Khalil Lako advocates for foreign doctors and believes there are hundreds of these candidates in Ontario alone who would volunteer their time.
Because at the moment the situation is an emergency situation, so they are ready to join any challenge.
Garabedian says he'll happily relocate wherever he's needed, with an overwhelming desire to help the country that gave his family peace.
Being a Canadian citizen, I feel that I need to have the chance to pay back to Canada. So I'm waiting a call. Once they need me, I'm a soldier in this country.
The Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons says once that 30-day license is over, there is an option to apply for an extension. As of last week, 10 applications had been approved, but the college couldn't confirm if any of them were international graduates. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Volunteers with GlobalMedic are setting up temporary triage tents outside some GTA hospitals. Today, one went up at Etobicoke General. Kelly Ewan was at Brampton Civic Hospital when they raised a tent there and got a tour.
Well, this tent is 60 feet by 20 feet.
the kind of tent typically set up by GlobalMedic as a field hospital in the aftermath of a natural disaster. Don Jorgensen has helped set up many of these over the past 6 years, but never in his hometown.
My team is usually ready to hop on a plane and go anywhere in the world to help out. This time, unfortunately, we are getting in our cars and driving down the street to help out our neighbors and friends.
Jorgensen is also an officer with Peel Regional Police. He was joined by others in the community, including local firefighters, in setting up the tent in the parking lot.
We have to do what we can.
But it is hoped the tent will never need to be used. Dr. Oscar Carby oversees emergency services at the hospital.
So we don't expect to run out of room, but if we do, we have this contingency plan in place.
Here's how it would work. If there is a surge of infected patients, the hospital's fracture clinic would be remodeled as a temporary emergency department for non-infected patients. And the tent would serve as a triage or screening area for them.
Any cases that are low risk and are minor problems will be seen by the physician right there and then and cared for. Those patients that require further care or perhaps some kind of procedure performed, they are at low risk, they will be directed to go to a separate entrance.
Meanwhile, the hospital's existing emergency department would be solely reserved for suspected COVID-19 cases.
If all goes according to plan, it'll remain empty for this whole situation. However, if they do need the extra space, it's there for them.
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Brampton.
A glimmer of hope in hard-hit Europe. Both Italy and Spain have seen a drop in the number of coronavirus deaths. But health experts in both countries are warning people not to let their guard down. Italy remains the hardest hit country in the region with some 16,000 deaths. Spain has seen some 13,000 from the coronavirus. Meanwhile, the U.S. passed a somber milestone today. They have now been more than 10,000 corona-related deaths in that country. It comes as America's top infectious diseases experts said they are struggling to get the outbreak under control. According to an internal government watchdog report, hospitals across the U.S. are facing a shortage of medical equipment, including even thermometers. There are more than 337,000 total cases in the country. Over the weekend, American health officials said wearing a cloth mask while out in public could help stop the spread of COVID-19. And as we told you earlier today, Canadian health officials took a similar stance, an idea they had resisted until now. So how might a mask help, and how do you wear it properly? We asked Toronto physician Dr. Samir Gupta for his professional insight.
Let's start with how a mask might help. So most importantly, you might actually have the coronavirus and not even know it, in which case wearing a mask will actually protect other people from catching it from you by blocking your infected droplets coming out of your mouth and nose. The mask might also protect you from other people's droplets, and it might also prevent you from touching your mouth and nose with your hands, which could easily have become contaminated by touching any infected surface. But there are pitfalls. So the mask doesn't cover your eyes, where the coronavirus can also get in, and a lot of people don't use these masks properly. So the whole idea is that if the mask is blocking those infected droplets, then the coronavirus is sitting on the surface of the mask. So you've got to wash your hands before you put it on, you've got to wash your hands after you take it off, and you never touch the surface, which means doing things like this defeats the purpose. So what's the right type of mask? So this is an N95 mask. It's designed to block microparticles created during certain medical procedures. It's meant to be airtight, which means it has to be fitted to each person's face. It gets hot and sweaty, it can leave bruises. So if you're not a healthcare worker, you really shouldn't be wearing this kind of mask. This is a surgical mask. So this is designed to block those droplets, and that's exactly what we want. This is a bandana. So this and other types of cloth masks will probably reduce transmission of your own droplets to others, but they're not designed to block other people's droplets. So if you use them, you still have to try to maintain that physical distance. So what should you do? Well, if you're sick, stay home and wear a mask to protect others around you. If you're not sick, I would say it depends. Ideally, don't leave your house, in which case you won't need a mask. If you do leave your house, try to stay 6 feet away from anyone else, in which case you also don't need a mask. But if you can't do either of those things, I think wearing a mask properly will reduce the chances of coronavirus transmission. So if you've got a medical grade mask, you can use it. If you don't have a mask and you want to get one, buy a cloth mask. But either way, you've got to use the mask properly, which means don't assume you're invincible, don't stop washing your hands, don't stop trying to physically distance, and always handle the mask as if it's contaminated with the coronavirus. Finally, don't forget that hospitals are running low on masks right now. So if you've got a supply of unused medical masks, ask your doctor how you can get those back into the healthcare system, because your providers desperately need them right now.
As of today, you can once again return your empties to the beer store. The program was put on hold in March, but now it is back. Some employees and their families, though, are concerned they're being exposed to the coronavirus. Omar Debaghi Pacheco has the story.
It's been more than 2 weeks of empty cans and bottles piling up. The beer store is accepting them once again, and some employees say that's bad news. They're afraid to lose their jobs if they speak out. Their families are afraid to get sick if they don't.
My biggest worry is that I'm going to get the virus because my boyfriend gets the virus. And I have asthma, so I'm super concerned about that.
Her boyfriend works at the beer store. She says he's been given personal protective equipment, but her fear is that plastic gloves and masks won't be enough to protect against hundreds of bottles and cans covered in potentially infected saliva.
My main concern is that people are not going to be cleaning their bottles and their cans. You could be drinking your alcohol and then bring it back and not even know you have it.
She has started an online petition to temporarily stop the returns. But there are also those who rely on collecting empties, and for some of them, it's the difference between begging for change or making an honest living.
I will wait for over 2 weeks to cash my cans. Oh, I'm glad I opened it. We didn't have much money.
Kevin Stewart says it brings him about $200 on a good week. It's no small task, but it's a matter of pride.
Well, it's important to me when you have money, but I never ask somebody for money.
The process for getting that money has changed. You can now expect a much longer wait, and only a limited number of stores will be accepting empties. The beer store representatives were not available for an interview, but a spokesperson says in a statement that they've implemented personal protective equipment for all employees, plexiglass shields at cash registers, and social distancing measures throughout the store. They also say they've been in contact with health officials every step of the way. Dugenio says she won't stop her petition until she feels safe.
Best case outcome, they stop empty returns until the declaration is lifted.
Omar Debaghi Pacheco, CBC News, Ottawa.
It was in Bob Cajun, I saw the constellations reveal themselves one star at a time.
That is Paul Langlois of the Tragically Hip singing the band's hit song, Bob Cajun. The song is taking on a new weight as that small town deals with the deadly COVID-19 outbreak at the Pinecrest Nursing Home. Langlois encouraged Canadians across the country to join in a show of support, singing the song at exactly 6 p.m. last night. He says participating in the moment was a no-brainer, an opportunity to tell the people of Bob Cajun that they are in his thoughts. And many others also answered this call.
Went back to bed this morning, and as I'm pulling down the blinds.
People sang from their porches, others in their homes. Some even came together online. Here's a particularly powerful performance from the Peterborough Singers choir as we head to break. Colin, I know you're proud of your Kingston connections, and the hip song, Bob Cajun, To Break There, just gave me goosebumps how they were doing that for the Pinecrest Nursing Home.
Yeah, so beautiful. Me too as well. Goosebumps and also maybe tearing up just a little bit. Yeah, I love Kingston and the hip, obviously. You know, I'm old enough that they played high school dances that I would go to when I was a little bit younger. So they were older than me, but come on. So nice to see that heartfelt with everyone singing around Ontario and beyond. All right, we're going to bring it back home, not to my Kingston home, my Toronto home, because I want to, it's the beginning of the month. I know it's not the very beginning, but it's my first chance to be with you. And I just want to show you, kind of give you an idea of what April is generally like in Toronto in terms of an average daytime high around 12 degrees. That's averaging it out from the beginning, like on a day like this, would be 9 degrees. By the end of the month, it's 15. So average daytime high is around 12. And then if we just talk about what's the typical, sorry, you can see this, I'm pushing the clicker and we're just having a heck of a time trying to advance this. What's typical for snowfall is just over 4 centimeters. Yes, we get snow in April, so 4.5 centimeters. And for rainfall, it's about 66 millimeters. We're going to do this the old-fashioned way. Oh, there you go, 4.5 centimeters and rainfall, yeah, over 60 millimeters anyway. In terms of what we're going to be seeing, I'm just going to put that aside for you. We are looking at pretty quiet conditions tonight. There's some isolated showers to the northwest of us, but most of that's not even really reaching the ground. So we have quiet night tonight, 4 degrees for the low that we're looking at for Toronto. And then what happens as we go through the day tomorrow is much of the day is actually going to be quite nice with sunshine. And kind of like today. So we'll see highs 12 to 14 degrees around the GTA. But as we get into the later afternoon and evening hours, system's going to move in, cloud cover, some showers start to develop tomorrow evening, and we'll see some rain showers overnight, then Tuesday night into Wednesday. And then Wednesday we'll have some partial clearing in the mid part of the day, and it's still going to be mild. In fact, maybe even warmer. We could hit about 15 degrees for a high. So well above this seasonal average in terms of what we're going to see, but that'll be kind of the last day of the really mild temperatures, and then we'll be back to seasonal as we get into Thursday and Friday, and I'll have all kinds of details and maps to go with that, Dwight, when we talk about it tomorrow.
Thank you, Colette. Welcome back.
Thank you.
This weather update is brought to you by Fairmont Le Chateau Frontenac, the best location for your next spring break getaway in Quebec City.
After the break, stick around for today's Frontline Hero. Long-term care home residents are some of the most vulnerable during the COVID-19 pandemic, and Oya Muslu is doing everything she can to help keep them healthy. Muslu is a nutrition manager with Southridge Care Homes in Pickering, overseeing the cooks, servers, and dishwashers. She is today's frontline hero. Now, Muslu's partner got in touch with us saying she is doing absolutely everything humanly possible to keep her 300-plus residents healthy and properly fed. Her staff is awesome, but Oya is juggling an ever-diminishing workforce and is working her magic to fill the gaps. It is no easy task and is often a thankless job. I can attest that she is indeed a force of nature. So, thank you for everything you're doing, Oya. And if you'd like to share a story about your frontline hero, send us a selfie-style video explaining why they are a hero to you. Email us at torontotips@cbc.ca or tag us on Instagram, CBC Toronto, or just send us a message on Facebook. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you back here.